Hey y'all, so this is going to be my final video about the salt topic for a while because I've said everything there is to say, and if you still think salt is good for you, you're either suffering from salt psychosis or you're not that intelligent. So this video is from a guy named Joseph Everett talking about the shady science that sold you a lie about salt, so hey, let's watch it.
To prove that low salt is a scam, I ate an entire salt shaker of salt in one day.
I'd like to see you try eating even half that salt shaker at once. You're gonna die.
Salty diets are leading to health complications around the globe.
Too much sodium in the food.
The deadly risk from salt.
Salt.
Unhealthy salt.
This is a worldwide problem.
Because I'm on a low salt diet too. Heart attacks and strokes. Heart attack and stroke.
Number one risk for a diet-related death, sodium.
So we've been told the science was
Ooh, did you guys see his skin? I saw that in the thumbnail, but I thought it was edited for the thumbnail. But wow, that's really bad skin. I can't tell if he's like a burn victim or if those are acne scars, but not a great look.
On so many different things, only to learn later that
if it's like acne scars, and you know, it kind of shows his diet is horrible and he doesn't know what he's talking about, because you can cure acne scars with a certain protocol in the diet, but I'm sure he doesn't know that.
we didn't get the full story.
Are all calories equally fattening? No.
Low fat is not necessarily better.
Eggs may be healthier than first thought.
But what if we've been misled even on something as simple as salt? After all, it's so simple. Salt raises your blood pressure because sodium attracts water, so if you have more sodium in the bloodstream, it's going to bring in more water and increase the blood pressure.
It's not that simple. A big reason why salt increases blood pressure and also increases heart rate is because the salt is so toxic. The body has to do these physiological processes that stop the salt from harming you as much.
But if it's that simple, then my blood pressure should raise dramatically, or I might even have a seizure if I ate 12 times the daily limit of salt in one day, 60 grams. So that's exactly what I did. I put this 60 grams of salt in about 5 liters of water and drank it throughout the day while checking my blood pressure. By the way, definitely do not try this at home. People have died from consuming less than 60 grams of salt all at once.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Why would you even mention that? You just completely destroyed your credibility.
I lived because I drink it slowly over a day.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, we could end the video right here. He just admitted that salt is toxic.
I checked my blood pressure 5 times throughout the day while eating tons of salt, around 10 to 15 grams between each blood pressure check. Remember, the WHO's limit for salt for an entire day is only 5 grams.
Americans eat.
Yes, it's 5 grams because this is how much you need to eat every day without an extremely overt negative effect. If you start eating 20, 30, 40, 60 grams a day, like he's saying, your markers, your health markers, your entire body will be fried.
Almost 3 to 4 times the recommended daily amount of salt.
I finished a total of 63.4.
That's sickening. How can you even look at that amount of like powdery substance of crystalline rocks and be like, oh yeah, let me fill my stomach with that?
5 grams of salt by 10 p.m. My blood pressure started out at 114/66 and ended up at 113/61 before I went to bed. So weirdly enough, there was a mild drop in my blood pressure. My blood pressure remained in the ideal range.
This is because the blood pressure increases right after you consume the salt, but he's waiting to take these blood pressure markers. So his markers actually go down. That's why if he actually took a blood pressure test like 2-3 minutes after the salt, you would see it's extremely high.
The whole time. Nothing really happened. On another morning, I checked my blood pressure before and
Look at the monster. Is that the zero sugar one? Also, it's in Japanese. I know this guy lives in Japan, which like kind of just shows he's a pest. If you're a white guy moving to Japan, like you're actually a pest. You're an invasive species. You don't belong in Japan. Only Japanese people belong in Japan, but that's a, discussion for another day.
after having a Monster energy drink. Within just an hour, the Monster took my blood pressure from 108/66 all the way to 125/71.
Oh, what?
Well, yeah, that's the caffeine, and caffeine will increase it much more than salt because caffeine is a much stronger stimulant than salt.
Think about those popular energy drinks. Researchers discovered those who drank the drinks had elevated blood pressure.
So I could get a significant rise in my blood pressure with just a single can of Monster in just an hour.
And he also could be lying about these results, but we'll see.
But not even an entire salt shaker rose my blood pressure. So what's going on here? The reason I decided to do this experiment was because after asking some questions about salt, I learned that the idea that we need to cut down on salt intake to be healthy is a total scam. Let's rewind. The year is
Why did he cut to like The Rock as like a health thing? Bro, The Rock is on steroids.
1977, a big year for America. Jimmy Carter became president, Star Wars came out, Elvis died, Sugar Ray Leonard made his professional debut, the first professional Apple computer came out, the CIA revealed its involvement in mind control experiments, and people were
That's a funny thing to mention.
wearing bell bottoms and had fluffy hair.
Be a pepper, drink
Dr. Pepper.
That year is when the famous dietary goals for the United States were being crafted by George McGovern, which would tell Americans to cut salt and saturated fat. There was actually plenty of opposition to these dietary guidelines at the time.
I have pleaded in my report and will plead again orally here for more research on the problem before we make announcements to the American public.
Nonetheless, the famous food pyramid would be rolled out to Americans not just as a guide for what to eat, but it would dictate what would be served to kids in school, people in the hospital, people in the armed forces, and so on. So what about salt? Well, the 1977 report included the recommendation to limit salt to just 5 grams per day, the same amount that the WHO still recommends today. But
5 grams a day is still way too much, and I would say that 5 grams a day is pretty adequate for people on high vegetable cooked diets, because the thing is, when you're eating these high cooked vegetable diets, which mean like lots of bread, lots of grains and all this, you do need to add a little bit of salt, because the vegetables you're consuming, the cooked vegetables, are depleted of any sodium whatsoever. And of course in salt you can digest a small amount of the sodium, 2-3%, but it's still destroying your body. And this is like how vegans have to supplement B12, even though B12 has never even been proven to work properly, which I'll make a video on that someday. But when you're on these high grain diets, you are basically eating like a herbivorous animal, but you do not have the stomach and the digestive system that herbivorous animals have, that they need to be able to utilize the sodium that's in their food. So it's different to us. So that's why they recommend this amount of salt. And I would say if you're on a high, if you're eating lots of bread and grains like this, something like 5 grams a day, no more than 5 grams a day, is pretty much how much salt you need. Because remember, you only digest 2-3% of the sodium, and a human, like a grown man, 6 foot, 180 pounds or so, needs something like 700-800 milligrams of sodium a day. Not that exact, like you can get away with like 400-500, but let's move on.
What was this recommendation based on? Well, let me remind you that while we're not often taught much about salt other than it raises blood pressure and that you should eat less of it, we actually really need salt. A March 1940 paper describes the case of a child who, starting from 11 months, had a very unusual craving for salt. The toddler would throw up almost everything except for mother's milk. At the advice of a doctor, the parents tried giving the child crackers. He threw those up too, but soon he started licking all the salt off of the crackers and then would ask for more. Once the boy figured out what was in the salt shaker, the mother said he refused to eat anything unless a salt shaker was also on the table. He ate plain salt by dipping his finger into it and bringing it to his mouth.
This is because the child has a severe mineral deficiency. Like I've mentioned several times now, the actual taste of the salt, the salty flavor, it's like a drug where it tricks your body into thinking that there's something healthy, that there's minerals. If you gave this kid meth, he would do the same thing. He'd start licking meth instead of eating food. And, of course, the only thing he wanted was mother's milk, because that's the only thing that's healthy there. Because, of course, they're giving him crackers and shit.
It's estimated that the toddler was eating an extra teaspoon of plain table salt each day. In addition,
a teaspoon is not a humongous amount of salt. If the boy started eating 2-3 tablespoons a day, he'd die very quickly.
Into his foods already being saltier than his parents. Based on weight, the adult equivalent of that would be around 20 to 30 grams of extra salt per day. Later, the boy...
That's not enough to kill you.
His weird behavior made complete sense because his body was urging him what it needed to get. The parents became very worried about his condition and admitted him to the hospital at age 3. Unfortunately, after...
Oh my god, at 3? I thought the boy might have been older. That's fucked up.
Only 7 days on the hospital's low...
That's human abuse.
...salt diet, he suddenly died. In the paper, they specifically wrote that it would seem that this boy, by increasing his salt intake, kept himself alive for 2.5 years. The boy had Addison's disease, a disease that makes you excrete tons of sodium. So salt has always been vital for life, but the idea that salt causes high...
That Addison's disease was caused by the salt, but whatever.
Blood pressure gained popularity thanks to Dr. Lewis Dahl. Dahl found some data suggesting that populations who ate more salt seemed to have more hypertension, and then he began studying the effects of high salt diets in rodents. Now, not only were the rats in Dahl's experiments not humans, they were a special type of rat. In 1963, Dahl fed rats a high salt diet and found that some, but not all, developed high blood pressure. He then selectively bred the rats to create a strain of rats that were genetically extra sensitive to salt. Later, in 1970,
that's horse shit, dude.
He fed the salt-sensitive rats commercial baby food, and about half of the salt-sensitive rats died. He assumed that the high salt content of the baby food was what killed the rats. After his study was published, the U.S.
Well, that's not necessarily true. The baby food, what killed the rat was the vegetable oil and the other nonsense in there. Again, the thing with salt, I almost feel like it's controlled opposition, where people will, of course salt is harmful, but people will blame salt for like what vegetable oils or whatever did. So these people are like, oh, actually salt must be good because you guys made an error.
The Senate issued a mandate for lowering salt in baby foods. In his book, The Salt...
I'll give you a great example real quick before we move on. Sugar. Sugar is blamed for what vegetable oils do. However, sugar is not good for you. Maxing on sugar, like sugar maxing, is not a good idea whatsoever. But Some people believe this, like the Ray Peters and stuff. Some people are like, oh, well, because they blamed vegetable oil's effects on sugar, that must mean sugar is good for you.
Dr. James DiNicolantonio says that there wasn't even a single study.
I know this James guy. This guy's a Twitter maxer. This guy's always posting on Twitter about how salt is good for you. He's not even a real doctor.
Investigating whether salt causes hypertension in humans until 1983, 6 years after they crafted the low-salt dietary guidelines for Americans. He also pointed out that Lewis Dahl didn't mention what the human equivalent dose of salt would be in his rodent studies. Jordan Filkall explained that the human equivalent dose necessary to give the salt-sensitive rats high blood pressure in Lewis Dahl's experiments was 40 grams. That is 4.7 times what the average of modern American actually eats today, 8.5 grams per day. Remember, this is in the salt-sensitive rats. In fact, the human equivalent of what the salt-resistant rats were eating was way higher than my salt shaker of salt in a day experiment, which was 60 grams. The salt-resistant rats could eat the human equivalent of 100 grams of salt a day and still not get high blood pressure. So again, the 90s...
Well, rats are slightly on the herbivorous side of things, so they are a little bit more adept to eating salt.
77 report told us to limit our salt intake to just 5 grams a day, but there wasn't a single study investigating whether salt causes hypertension in humans until 1983. Let's rewind. We're back in the 1500s.
Okay, but like, dude, this doesn't even matter. Can you stop talking about hypertension and high blood pressure? That's not even like the main reason why salt is bad for you. That's just a side effect.
Christopher Columbus was arrested, Magellan went on a big trip, Michelangelo's David and Sistine Chapel were completed, Copernicus said the sun was the center of the universe, and refrigerators didn't exist. So people...
Refrigerators did exist back then. Look up how the Romans had their own like humongous little building that was a refrigerator.
Preserved their food with salt. This meant that salt intake in particular regions of Europe was very high, around 40 to 100 grams, almost 2 salt shakers worth. They ate plenty of salty foods like salted fish.
This is complete nonsense. They were not consuming that much salt, but it is true that people back then would salt their raw meat, and this is because the salt is an antibiotic and stops it from fermenting, and just out of culture back then, people preferred their meat raw and fresh. So there's that. But these people, what they would do is instead of, for example, if they preserved a piece, like a raw slab of meat in salt, instead of eating the salt off it, they would wash it off. They'd remove the salt.
Then if you fast forward to the early 1800s until World War II, Western societies consumed 3 times the WHO's recommended limit of sodium, between 15 and...
Okay, I've heard of this. I think it was in London at some point in time where they said they were eating 15, 17 grams a day. And this could be true, but these people were suffering from health issues. This is why diseases were rampant back then. Any disease like Black Plague or whatever, the Spanish flu, can all be connected to some kind of chemical or something overtly harmful in the diet or the environment of people.
17 grams of salt per day based on military archives data. Yet widespread high blood pressure is a totally recent phenomenon. So how exactly did the 1977 committee arrive at this specific number, 5 grams of salt per day? Well, 2 people out of Louisiana State University Medical Center advised the committee that Americans should reduce their salt intake, except their position was that high sodium in the context of low potassium could cause hypertension in people who were genetically susceptible. The committee report didn't end up mentioning anything about potassium or genetics though. They just said to cut your salt intake. As Dr. DiNicolantonio points out, there was no evidence whatsoever at the time that 5 grams specifically is the most appropriate amount of salt for everyone. They just made that up. In fact, some experts were opposing this advice. The American Medical Association and the Committee on the Nutrition of the American Academy of Pediatrics both protested the recommendation to restrict salt intake at the time, saying that the data just does not support the recommendation. So we're supposed to reduce salt to reduce hypertension and prevent heart disease. Yet it wasn't finally until 1912 that heart disease was even big enough of an issue to be formally documented. And far before that, we had been preserving food with salt, meaning we had been eating tons of salt, several times the amount the WHO recommends today. So let's take a look at the South Korean paradox. South Koreans eat a wide variety of salty foods, with the easiest example being kimchi, cabbage and other vegetables preserved in salt and spices. For many Koreans, kimchi is...
Well, of course, it's vegetables. When you eat cooked vegetables, you do pretty much have to salt it because it's highly sodium deficient and they do deprive your body of sodium. So there's that.
Served at literally every meal. The average South Korean consumes around 4,000 milligrams of sodium per day, much more than the average American, and almost twice as much as the US dietary guidelines recommend. Despite this, according to a 2022 report out of the Harvard School of Public Health, Korea has the lowest rates of heart disease in the world. Further, despite...
This is because of vegetable oils. I mentioned this in my salt video, but salt is not the main cause of heart disease. It is only an accelerator. Salt accelerates heart disease.
No change in their food culture, Koreans' death rate from heart disease went down 40% from 2000 to 2019. In fact, data from a September 2015 paper funded by the Korea Food Research Institute suggests that extra salt consumption might actually be protective against hypertension, heart disease, and stroke.
That's total nonsense.
Data shows that the
This is pick and choosing. This is cherry picking at its finest.
quartile groups that consume the most sodium had the lowest rates of hypertension, coronary heart disease, and stroke. This has been dubbed the Korean paradox.
How is that? Salty.
Now, tons of salt may be bad for you, but too little salt is likely much worse. So you might be curious.
untrue. Too much salt can literally kill you.
Why nothing happened when I ate that entire salt shaker of salt. Well, let's take
I like how he says this, but he didn't even prove it, that he drank it, but whatever.
a look at this study. In a 1979 study, they gave men with normal blood pressure more and more salt. They kept ramping up the salt until they reached as much as 87 grams of salt, about 1.5 salt shakers. This is about 15 times the amount of salt that the WHO recommends, and about 10 times what the average American actually consumes.
I just want to mention, it's crazy that this guy is purposely saying misinformation against the World Health Organization, but when I said something briefly, like slightly different to the WHO, my video got deleted and I got a warning on YouTube, so make of that what you will.
What happened? Well, they just peed out almost all of the salt. They found that the more salt that they
So the body can urinate a lot of the excess salt out, not all of it. But when you consume a ridiculous amount of salt, the first thing the body tries to do is make you urinate it out. And if you do not have enough fluid to urinate it out, it makes you shit it out. You get liquid diarrhea out of your asshole. This is why people who drink salty water get liquid diarrhea every day. If you guys ever meet a girl who's into the plasma stuff, just know, if you ever get in bed with her, make sure you pick the right position, because otherwise she's going to diarrhea all over you. Just saying.
gave to the people, the more salt that they peed out until they were peeing out tons of salt. The point is that most people with healthy kidneys, like myself, should be able to just excrete whatever salt is too much for their body.
I should probably mention that at some point in the day I got watery diarrhea, so that's...
Bro, oh my, was I not just talking about this, bro? You have to be kidding me. I can end the video right here.
Another way the body can excrete large amounts of salt.
You spilled the salt. That's what's the matter.
The body is well equipped to deal with too much salt. In fact, biologists
Oh my gosh, that was so funny. Whoever sent me this video, I appreciate it.
just like when they are thirsty or hungry, animals and humans will go to great lengths to get enough salt. Elephants will uproot entire trees to get at the salty soil under the roots. Gorillas will chew on rotting wood to eat the salty microbes, and some animals will even drink urine for its sodium content. Though, as Mark Kurland...
First of all, every animal you just listed right there was a herbivore. Secondly, when they do things like lick the tree bark, it's not salt in there, it's actual sodium. But whatever.
He points out in his book Salt, A World History, humans easily take the cake for capture the salt. In the book, he lays out how salt-seeking drove civilizations, built empires, and won wars. Romans established every major city near a salt works, and for some time, Roman troops were paid in salt. At the time, salt was...
This is total nonsense. You need to read this one book called The Fat of the Land, which actually shows that what drove humans around the earth was not seeking salt, it was seeking fat. Because fat is how you survive. You can't survive on salt alone. And the reason why soldiers were paid in salt is because salt is a stimulant. If you're in battle, if you're tired, if you're sleep deprived, you can take a tablespoon of salt to the face and it'll wake you right up, just like coffee. This is why soldiers in like World War II and Vietnam were prescribed amphetamines, because it keeps you awake. These soldiers didn't do amphetamines and meth because they're healthy. They did it because it's stimulants that keep you awake. Same thing with salt. Salt was like ancient history's version of caffeine.
If you're exercising a lot in the sun, going to the sauna, doing a low-carb diet, fasting, or doing things that's going to make you sweat and lose more sodium, you'll have to be more proactive about your salt intake. This brings us to the sponsor of this video, Element. Not many people realize just how important electrolytes are when it comes to energy levels. There's a very interesting connection between losing...
Of course, this video is a sponsorship. Who would have guessed? Guys, honestly, I should have mentioned this. I made a big mistake in my salt video by not mentioning the reason why people promote high salt diets. The reason why they promote these high salt diets is to sell you a product, as you can see here. He's literally selling you salt with synthetic sugar replacements like aspartame or whatever, or stevia. Stevia is not synthetic, but stevia actually was used to for abortions, so it can't be that good for you.
Electrolytes and fatigue. I'm actually finishing this video up at 4 a.m. and getting plenty of electrolytes and sodium is one of my go-to things to do when I'm doing an all-nighter. There are many
Of course it is, because salt is a stimulant.
ways that you can get your sodium, but what I like to do is Element. It's a convenient way to get a good balance of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. You may have noticed me talking a lot about fasting and low...
Let's look at the ingredients of Element real quick. Okay, so I'm looking at the ingredients right now. Salt, citric acid. Citric acid is an antibiotic. Magnesium malate. That is not the correct form of magnesium for supplements. It's actually horrible. Potassium chloride, not the correct form either. Natural lemon flavor, which is a lab-made ingredient, like on the level of aspartame. And then stevia leaf extract. What did I say? Of course it has stevia in it, which has been used for abortions in ancient Egypt societies. So, well, that's it for today, y'all. I hope you learned something. I appreciate you. I love you. Bye-bye.